After my husband Richard passed away from a stroke on a cold winter morning, the house that was once filled with laughter suddenly became soulless. I sat quietly in the dining room, listening to the wind pounding against the glass doors and wondering, what value do I have when no one needs me anymore? Brandon, the son I once held in my arms on rainy nights, raised on my own salary cut from my needs, now has a family of his own. Jenna, his wife, never liked me. Maybe to her I was just an old taste of her husband's past. I don't blame her, because I think I can bear a little coldness as long as Brandon still needs me. I don't live to demand. I don't beg for love. I just want to be there. A text message asking how I am, a sudden call is enough to warm my heart in the middle of a winter night, but for the past 3 years, all I received were regular transfers, as if my presence had been exchanged for 3 lifeless numbers in my bank account. I was the shadow standing silently behind the door, shouldering, sacrificing, loving silently, no applause, no thanks. And then, one evening in June, the phone rang. On the screen was the name Brandon, just 2 familiar words, but it took me a few seconds to dare to touch the answer button. Little did I know that the phone call would be the first crack, opening the door to an unexpected storm for me. The phone rang loudly in the sultry evening when I was sitting alone with a cup of cold tea. The screen lit up Brandon. My heart skipped a beat for no apparent reason. My son, how long has it been? Since he called, I picked up the phone, pick up an answer. On the other end of the line was a hasty sigh and a discordant voice. Mom, I'm sorry. Are you free? We really need you right now. I heard a mix of sounds, a baby crying, running water, and Jenna's voice small, raspy, and irritable. Brandon spoke quickly, as if trying to keep things together. Gracie, she's had a fever for 2 days, hasn't eaten. Jenna's still not fully recovered from giving birth, and I don't know what to do. Can you come? For a moment, I felt my heart sink, as if someone were squeezing it. I didn't ask why they hadn't called sooner, nor did I mention the 3 years of silence. I just said, I'll be there tomorrow morning. After hanging up, I started packing. I picked out some light clothes, some small gifts for my Nisa, and a parenting book I'd read dozens of times when Brandon was a baby. I dare not hope, but I hope that this time they really need me. The next morning, I stood at my son's front door, clutching my suitcase, my heart pounding. The door opened and Brandon appeared, hair disheveled, eyes dark, shirt wrinkled. Mom, you're here. His voice was as soft as a breeze. In that moment, I saw him as the little boy who had a fever and was holding me tight on that rainy night in early summer. I stepped into the house. The smell of milk, cough medicine, and heat wafting from the living room made me wince. The house was a mess. Baby clothes strewn about, and in the middle was Jenna sitting on the floor, hair disheveled, eyes glazed. In her arms was little Gracie, her face flushed, her lips dry from fever. Jenna looked up at me, not even a smile, just a cold nod. Chloe, you're here. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I didn't need flowers or thanks. I came for Gracie. I came for Brandon. I came because I couldn't ignore my child's cry for help. Without waiting another second, I washed my hands, took off my coat, and stepped forward. Let me hold her. You rest for a moment. Jenna paused, then reluctantly nodded and stepped back. When I picked Gracie up, her little body was burning hot. I placed her gently on my shoulder, patting her back just like I had done with Brandon when he was a newborn. The baby whimpered softly, and I felt the world gather in the palm of my hand. A strange feeling rose in my heart, a mixture of tiredness, anxiety, and quiet joy. But what I didn't know was that what awaited me behind this door, wasn't appreciation. It was a series of challenges more severe than I had ever imagined. In the early days, I told myself, just a few days, just temporary, everything will fall into place. But the path I envisioned, never came. From the moment I walked into that house, it was as if I had been invisibly assigned the role of the one who takes care of everything. No one said it, but everything was piled on me with a creepy naturalness. Gracie's fever was still raging. Jenna was barely out of bed. I thought she was exhausted from giving birth, and I understood, so I did everything. Warming her up, changing diapers, putting her to sleep. Washing each tiny one piece by hand because her skin is sensitive and she shouldn't use a washing machine. I did it without complaining because I thought helping my child, helping my grandchild, was enough. But then, on the 3rd and 4th days, things started to change. I noticed that Brandon was no longer staying up all night to watch the baby like he had when he called me. He came home late, sometimes making excuses for working overtime. One time I found him sprawled out in the office, playing a video game with headphones on, leaving me to deal with the baby who was crying himself hoarse. As for Jenna, she didn't say anything but orders as soft as the cold wind. Evelyn. I ordered formula online, Remember to pick it up. Can you sweep the floor a bit? I'm allergic to dust. Don't feed the baby then, he'll have reflux. Don't turn on the air conditioner too much. The electricity bill last month was too high. I nodded. I smiled. I continued to work, but every time I laboriously mopped the floor, or walked back and forth late at night with Gracie in my arms to lull her to sleep, layers of fatigue seemed to cover my mind. No one asked me if I had eaten. No one said thank you. Every meal was too spicy, too heavy, not suitable for an old person's stomach. I quietly picked up vegetables, poured some light soup, and ate in silence. I slept on the sofa in the living room, Brandon said. The spare room is still too messy. I'll clean it up this weekend. But 2 weeks passed, and that room remained closed like the door to one's own heart. At night, I lay there, turning as gently as possible, afraid of waking her, afraid of the mosquitoes, afraid of the squeaking springs that would make Jenna complain. I became a shadowy part of the house, always present, always useful, but never seen as a human being with feelings. One night, I stayed up all night rocking Gracie when she coughed violently. In the morning, Jenna came out, glanced at me and said, "Did you remember to sterilize the bottle last night? I think she's a little uncomfortable." I stood there, my hands still shaking from a sleepless night, my eyes dry with exhaustion. The question ran through my head like a dull knife. Am I a mother, a grandmother, or just an unpaid nameless maid? I had given up sleep, privacy, and even my peaceful retirement for love. But in this house I was no longer Evelyn, the mother, the grandmother, the one who raised Brandon from scratch. I was the sister, the aunt, the babysitter, and that seemed to be all. The self-pity, the sadness, did not come as a storm. It trickled down day by day, eating away at me silently, and in a moment of shattering like glass, I knew I could not continue like this forever. I remember that afternoon. Clearly, the early July heat was so oppressive that the ceiling fan only stirred up the stuffiness. Gracie cried incessantly, her cheeks red, her forehead beaded with sweat. I held her in my arms, patted her gently, fanned her, and quietly rubbed her back. On the wall, the air conditioner was still sitting there, old, but still working. I knew, because the first day I arrived, Brandon had turned it on for me to see. I hesitated for a few seconds, then picked up the remote. Just a few minutes, I told myself, just enough to cool the air for Gracie to sleep. And then, less than 10 minutes later, Jenna walked out of the bedroom like a cold wind. Her eyes narrowed, her hand reached up to turn off the air conditioner. The beep sounded like a sentence. "Do you know how much electricity costs?" she said, her voice harsh. "We can't just turn on the air conditioner every time you feel hot." I stood still holding Gracie, who had just fallen asleep and was awakened, squirming uncomfortably. I didn't answer. I couldn't believe my ears. I couldn't understand why an instinctive gesture of caring for my grandchild was considered a financial crime. At that moment, I wasn't angry anymore. I just understood. Like a knot in my heart had just popped open. Jenna didn't see me as a mother-in-law, or someone who had sacrificed her whole life for Brandon. She saw me as a burden, a redundant person. And Brandon, though gentle, though he was the child who hugged my leg every night, was now silent. Silent to the point of complicity that night. Sitting on my familiar couch, I didn't cry. I just stared at the ceiling, listened to the cicadas outside the window, and for the first time I asked myself, what am I doing here? I used to think helping my child was love, but now I understand love can't last long when it flows only one way. The next morning, as Brandon poured his coffee, I walked over. "Mom will be back tomorrow," I said softly, firmly. He looked up, startled. "What's wrong, Mom? Everything's fine." I just smiled faintly. "Because it's so fine. You should go. My family doesn't need you anymore." He didn't answer. There was only silence, heavier than any explanation. I turned away. My heart light. For the first time in months, I felt like I was walking for myself, and it was the beginning of something bigger. Freedom. I came home to a quiet morning. The sunlight filtered through the white curtains, casting a golden glow on the wood floor, everything familiar and strangely warm. It was the same old sofa by the window, but this time when I sat down, it was no longer the place where I collapsed after a tiring day. It was a place of my own choosing. I made a pot of Earl Grey tea, inhaling deeply the sweet aroma that permeated the kitchen. Everything was slow, quiet, no crying, no repeated requests, just me and the silence I had forgotten I deserved. That afternoon, as usual, I opened my banking app. The end of the month, an automatic reminder appeared. Mortgage transfer. To Brandon and Jenna. The familiar amount, $3,000, but this time my hand did not move across the screen. I sat still. Looking at the number was like looking back at myself all those years ago. I remembered that first night. On the sofa at their house, I remember the mosquitoes buzzing in my ears, the suffocating heat that squeezed my every breath, and Jenna coldly stepping out to turn off the air conditioner as if to extinguish the last bit of warmth I was trying to hold on to. I also remember the spicy hot meal that I couldn't bear to eat, and Jenna's gentle words, "You can cook for yourself if you want." I had come out of love, but they took it as an obligation. No thanks, no appreciation, just one demand after another. From babysitting to paying bills, I quietly turned off the transfer reminder, then opened a new tab, Adult Pottery Classes. I clicked the sign up button. The next day when Brandon called, his voice was a little confused. "Mom, the mortgage. Did you forget to transfer it?" I didn't beat around the bush. I didn't forget. I just thought it was time for you two to take responsibility for your own home. Silence. Then Brandon replied softly, "I understand." I knew he didn't really understand, but I also knew it was the first step. I wasn't angry. I just didn't want to continue to cultivate a habit that was draining me. Motherly love doesn't mean unconditional sacrifice. Love sometimes is knowing when to stop to save yourself. That evening, as I was reading in the soft yellow light, the phone rang. It was Brandon. His voice sounded strange. No longer confused, but worried, mixed with a hint of reproach. "Mom, are you really not going to send any more money?" I gently closed the book. "I'm not going to. I've made up my mind." There was a few seconds of silence on the other end. Then he continued, his voice as tense as a string. "Jenna and I are having a hard time. You know, we're struggling. If we're short $3,000 right now," I interrupted softly but firmly. "Son, I've been supporting you two for over 2 years. $3,000 a month. No thanks. No appreciation. I'm not doing it because I'm forced to, but I can't do it forever." Brandon sighed. Heavily, "You're picking the wrong time. Simon is young. Jenna isn't settled. If you cut it now, we might not survive." I felt my heart tighten at the mention of his name, but no, this time I didn't let my emotions guide me. "Maybe. But that's your responsibility and your wife's, not mine." Then, it was Jenna's turn. 2 days later, she called but from an unknown number. Her voice rang out as soon as I picked up, cold as steel. "Evelyn, I didn't think you'd do this. You said you'd help until Brandon got promoted. Now what? Are you going to put your son out on the streets?" I heard anger, resentment, but absolutely no remorse. "Jenna," I said slowly, "I'm not letting anyone off the streets. I'm just stopping funding a lifestyle that I don't respect. You think I don't know? You're bad-mouthing me. To the neighbors, you want to play the victim. I'm not bad-mouthing anyone. But if people are starting to see the truth, it's because of your behavior." I heard a sharp intake of breath through my nose. Maybe she was trying to hold back something more. "I thought you were part of the family," Jenna whispered, her voice harsh, "and I hoped you would act like a sensible family member." I said. The call ended in silence. No, hello, no thank you, no apology, but I didn't shake like I had before. I didn't cry, nor did I feel guilty. I felt calm that I had drawn the line, and for the first time in years, I found myself standing right where I needed to be on the other side. Freedom. That morning, for the first time in a long time, I woke up without a baby crying through the walls. No one called my name in the middle of the night asking, "Mommy, how do I stop the baby from crying?" No bank alert alerting me to a familiar transfer. Just me, a 60-year-old woman, sitting on the balcony of my small apartment, with a cup of tea in my hand and the morning sun shining on the brick steps. I looked at the flower pots that had been resoiled and pruned. New leaves had sprouted soft and bright, just like me after the storm. I was starting over. Not flashy, not noisy, but persistent and full of life. I started to spend time learning to draw something I had missed because I was busy raising my husband and children. Now, every afternoon, I sit in the community class, pencil in hand, scribbling and feeling my heart soften. Once I drew a hand old, but holding a sleeping child. The teacher asked me if I was the child's grandmother. I smiled, not answering every night. I cooked the dishes I like, simple, light, no chili, no pepper, no spicy sauce. I ate in silence without being reminded to wash more dishes, without being urged to clean the floor, without having to be wary of anyone else's taste. Every meal was a pampering of myself, a reminder that I deserved to be loved by myself. I also started keeping a diary, not to complain, but to remember every step I took, every limit I crossed, every time I learned. To say no, I was no longer a shadow passing through someone else's life, no longer an invisible hand ready to take on any burden. I was Evelyn, a woman with a forgiving heart who had now learned to keep a part of herself. Brandon still called occasionally, His voice was softer. No more demands, no more assumptions. Just, "Mommy, how was your day?" Sometimes a picture of Simon crawling, curious eyes, fumbling limbs. I still smiled. I still loved my nephew, that had never changed. But I no longer traded myself for that love. One sunny August afternoon, as I sat drawing a blue sky on a blank canvas, I suddenly realized I was no longer waiting for someone to love me like I used to. I was watering the plants on the balcony. When the phone rang, an unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. I could almost predict the voice on the other end. Evelyn Laura's voice was cold and sharp. "Are you happy? Everyone in the neighborhood is talking. You've made a fool of me." I looked up at the sky, the vast blue of a summer noon. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, don't pretend," she almost snapped. "You think cutting off your support without warning won't have consequences? My mom is crying, Brandon is stressed out, and I'm being treated like an ungrateful motherfucker by the mommy gang." I sighed. "I didn't say anything about you, I just stopped." "You know, we need that money," Laura continued, her voice shaking with anger. "You can't back out like that, not after all the promises you've made." I looked down at the blooming white chrysanthemums, promises I had promised to help when they were new, learning to be parents, but I had never promised endless self-sacrifice. "Laura," I said slowly, "clearly I have no financial obligation to you. It was a favor, not a contract. You know we can't afford the mortgage. It was your choice to buy a house," I replied, keeping my voice. "Even like the decision to have children, I didn't interfere, but don't expect me to take responsibility for those decisions." There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then Laura's voice changed to a cold one. "Aren't you ashamed? Simon will grow up knowing his grandmother abandoned him." This time I laughed softly, not bitterly, not angrily, but as if I understood something deep down. "No, Laura, my grandchild will know that his grandmother loved him with all her heart. And one day when he grows up and understands that love is not silence and exploitation, he will be proud that his grandmother stood up for him." "You're selfish?" "No," I interrupted, still gentle but firm. "I traded my sleep, my health, my money, my time, my dignity, to have you treat me like I was a walking wallet. You were ungrateful, but I'm not angry anymore. I just don't want to continue." Laura was silent. There was no hang-up, just a silence as thick as fog. And I knew this might be the last time we would talk like this. I hung up, put it aside, and turned back to the arbor. The wind brushed my hand gently, caressingly. Each drop of water that seeped into the soil was an affirmation. I was watering new life for myself. Not everyone would understand. Not everyone would agree. But I no longer needed approval because, for the first time in years, I no longer worried that I would be left behind. The days that followed passed quietly, as if life itself were healing each small cut inside me. I no longer rushed to check my phone, no longer woke up in the night with dreams of Simon crying or Laura scolding. My little house, where lonely footsteps once echoed, was now the place where my heart found peace. Every morning I made myself a cup of hot tea, stepped out onto the balcony to water the plants, and chatted with my neighbors about the weather, the flowers, or just old recipes. We laughed not loudly, not violently, but genuinely. I never thought I could smile like that after all the pain. I signed up for a ceramics class at the community college near my house. The first time I touched clay, something soft, warm, alive, I felt like I was tapping into a part of myself that had been buried for so long. I made a misshapen bowl, but it was mine. And I felt proud, not of the shape, but of starting over. The money I used to send Evan and Laura monthly went to buy books, good hiking shoes, and even a little trip along the coast. I watched the sunrise alone. Not sad, not regretful, but peaceful. Like an old bird that has flown far enough to understand that home is not where others accept you, but where you choose to love yourself. I did not return to my old role. I was no longer the mother who silently shouldered everything. I was Evelyn, the woman who had lived, who had been hurt, and who had chosen to be reborn. Not from anger, but from compassion for herself.